Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Margaret Lagerstedt. I'm the Archives and Special Collections Coordinator here at Thomas Crane Public Library, and I'm thrilled to be introducing this evening's edition to our Quincy 400 programming, Quincy 400 in conversation with author Jessica Levi. Quincy 400 is an opportunity to celebrate all the different stories that exist within our community from the origins of the city until now. What is so great about this community is that the creativity never stops. We are constantly bearing witness to new construction, new residents, new projects, and new history. All of what we do today will be tomorrow's history. So as we reflect on the past of this great city, we also celebrate the work of our contemporaries and the impact they have on now and tomorrow. With that, we are so excited for you all to be here to recognize the standout work of our local author, Jessica Levi. We will hear excerpts from her just-released novella, The Glass Garden, and from her debut and award-winning work, The Night Library of Sternenbeck. Following the readings, we will hear more from our guests in a moderated talk, and then any questions you have, we'll hear from you, the audience. I want to thank the Friends of the Thomas Crane Library who helped make programs like this possible, and thank you to Next Chapter Books for being here and making book sales for Jessica possible, and to Lanternfish Press, Jessica's publisher. Book signing and photos will conclude this evening's program. Without further ado, join me in formally welcoming Jessica Levi.
Thank you. Am I on? Oh, I'm on, okay. All right, so we're gonna start with the reading. So I'm going to start reading from my first book. You'll indulge me, I never got a release party for my first book because it came out during COVID, so this is my first book is a vampire romance in Pushkin sonnets. So what you're going to hear is going to rhyme. It's a form invented by Pushkin, who was a Russian author when he wrote Eugene Onegin, which is a book I discovered. Then it was like, where have you been all my life? So I decided to write a book in it. So this is the story about a young woman named Kunigunda. She's 19 years old, and her family are vampire hunters. As many 19-year-olds are, she's kind of questioning exactly what she's heard, what she's learned her entire life, and she decides to do something a little daring. She writes a letter to the vampire Graf, the Count, to ask to see his library. She figures this will be a good way that she can get into his good graces and maybe just try to discover something. Plus, she saw him one night in town and, it was, the earth moved. So she has written him a letter and is desperately waiting to see if he will reply. And we'll pick it up from there. A square of paper, neatly folded and sealed with a familiar crest, but Kinga trembles as if scolded to see the envelopes addressed to her. She breaks the waxen sealing. The paper parts at once, revealing a text that's typed and scrawled below a signature she doesn't know. Dear Madam, greetings. Your request to consult the castle's library is granted by His Excellency for Monday night. It would be best you present yourself here right at 8. You'll have 2 hours. Don't be late. By Monday night, she's lost in heady anticipation. She secures the book inside a satchel, ready for deep discussion. She procures a taxi, feels herself the essence of grown-up, till she's in the presence of Timmick. This is the Graf's bodyguard. And that mood deflates. She summons up some hauteur, states, "Good evening, Timmick, I'm expected." He answers, "Nice to see you back. I fear, though, you must leave your pack. The Graf's desires will be respected. But how can I?" She starts to plead. "I'll bring you anything you need." The library is warm, inviting. Wood carvings decorate the wall. And from gas chandeliers, the lighting with golden tones suffuses all. Arranged in stacks, the book collections extend to L's in both directions, while volumes by the hundreds squeeze in alcoves and in balconies. To Kunigunda, Timmick carries a sheaf of paper, pencils too, and turns to leave as if on cue. "But will the Graf be here?" she queries. It isn't clear that Timmick hears. 2 hours, then he disappears. Thus Kunigunda, her heart racing, has found herself alone at last, mid books and maps and volumes tracing the castle's dark and storied past. A wealth of knowledge, close and tempting, and yet the chamber seems quite empty. No sound, no shadow, breath or ghost of her mysterious ancient host to greet her as she wanders, shyly exploring stacks and brushing spines. So thwarted in her search for signs, "I guess I'll read," she whispers wryly. She settles in a cozy nook and greets a heavy, ponderous book. The balconies are hiding places that Kunigunda does not discern. On one of them, the vampire paces and listens to the pages turn. Why is she here? What inspiration has made her seek his invitation? He peers down at his guest below and wonders. Does Lucia know? Her grandmother would have prevented the girl from seeing him alone and burned the letter had she known. He grasps perhaps what made her send it, for surely one as old as he knows books aren't what she came to see. 2 hours pass, and disappointed, she leaves the books in piles about. When Timmick shows up as appointed, she sighs and lets him walk her out. Once home, she snubs her mother's greeting, and quickly to her room retreating, she shuts the door and turns the key. Oh God, how stupid could she be? Of course he wouldn't deign to see her or answer to her naive call, if he was even home at all. To make it worse, well, what if he were to tell her family where she'd been? Her grandmother would do her in. Embarrassment and worry racking her nerves, she drops down on the bed and grabs her bag to start unpacking, but finds an envelope instead. His crest again, but more exciting, the letters in his handsome writing. My dearest Fräulein, pleased was I my library should catch your eye. I could not join you, to my sorrow. 2 hours is not ample time for large collections such as mine. Would you return at 8 tomorrow? There you will have, you may be sure, my presence and a proper tour. She's thunderstruck. Of course she's going. But writing her like this implies he wants to see her. And knowing this, facts and questions soon arise, like this time, how will Timmick greet her? How quickly will his master meet her? And once met, will they be alone? What clothes would set the proper tone? The Tuesday evening finds she chose her green dress again with Ava's shoes. On her arrival, Timmick, whose demeanor is unaltered, shows her to where his lord waits patiently to show his guests the library. The brass doors part at Timmick's knocking. Come in, please, says a voice within. His voice, that voice. She leans back, rocking a little as the sound sinks in, eyes closed. But stop, the Graf is waiting. She shakes her head clear, concentrating, and holds her head up high before she steps past Timmick through the door. The Graf looks up and puts the book he was reading quickly to the side. Before her in a single stride and wearing a most genial look, he says, "Ah, you're here, you cannot guess how glad I am that you've said yes." The Graf extends his hand, she takes it. He says, "I've chosen to surround myself with precious things, which make it my honor showing you around." "The honor's mine," she says, and follows him through the chamber's aisles and hollows. She seems calm, but inside, a storm. Her grandma lied. His hand is warm. The books are treasures, vast, uncounted. He draws her deeper in to show her works he has in folio by Plutarch and by Kircher. Mounted in frames above are pages ripped from some Tchaikovsky manuscript. A glass case in a further section displays a codex, old and faint. A treatise on the resurrection by Isentrude, the local saint. This item Kinga finds amazing. She stands before the showcase, gazing, then feeling just a little proud, she reads some Latin text aloud and praises the illumination. Her words trail off into the air when she perceives the vampire's stare. His eyes are hard. A cold sensation creeps up her arms. His face austere, he asks, "What are you doing here?" She, startled, asks, "Did I offend you?" He waves her silent with his hand. "Just tell me, did Lucia send you? What sort of mischief has she planned?" "She doesn't know I'm here, I swear. She's in Serbia." "Yes, I'm aware. She's been gone a week, but even so, there's little that she doesn't know." The path behind her, Timmick's blocked it, discreetly moving into view and trapping her between the two. The Graf says, "Seeing you've concocted this scheme to seek me, tell me why. Believe I will know if you lie." His accusation stings, afflicting the girl with unexpected dread. She spies a canvas then depicting the old Graf, Siegfried, who is dead by her family's hands, and realizes the image of her in his eyes is of an enemy, a curse. Well, might it seem to him perverse that she should risk so much in senseless pursuit of his attention. Could she melt away right now, she would. But here she is, pinned and defenseless and praying for some sign of Ruth. What can she tell him but the truth? "Do you remember our first meeting? When you gave me that book?" "What book?" He interrupts, and it's defeating the lack of knowledge in his book. "The Stars of Sternendak, the fairy and wonder tale," she says, "with very detailed designs that caught the light." "Oh, that. I read it every night," she presses on. "Before I met you, my Oma told me to prepare for someone cold who didn't care for anything but blood, and yet you gave me a host of magic friends whose bravery earned them happy ends. I grew up, spent the last years vowing that childish things and I were through. But when I saw you Friday, vowing I wanted magic, wanted you." Her courage gone, she reaches blindly for some support, which Timmick kindly provides by bringing her a chair. She sits and gulps much-needed air. The Graf's not even looking at her, his focus on his father's face, then on the codex in its case. She grits her teeth to stop their chatter, her hands' heels pressed against her eyes. She holds the tears back. Well, she tries. Warm hands on hers, her face uncovered, keen eyes on hers rest for a beat. She blinks, bewildered, to discover her host is kneeling at her feet. "Forgive me," he says, "I implore you. One woman only once before you has ever sought me out, and she was hardly moved by love for me." Releasing her, he rises, saying, "You're free to leave if you prefer." So pensive does he seem to her, she softly asks, "And if I'm staying?" He says, "Then, Fräulein, ere you go, there's one more thing I have to show. But first I think you will be needing a lantern." This he finds and lights. He gestures her to follow, leading her through a door. "It's several flights," he says, and there, illumined gently, a spiral stair. She peers intently, but lantern light can't reach the top. "Go on, I'll tell you when to stop," he says, and at her hesitation, the Graf stands back to make it clear that she is not a captive here. No trap, no Timmick. Invitation. She takes the light and starts to climb the cool stone steps, one at a time. A spiral staircase never varies. It steps above and steps below. Pitch black, but for the light she carries, no way to tell how far to go. She hears her ragged breath escaping, her shoes against the granite scraping, and wonders if she's like to fall. His footsteps make no sound at all, nor has he spoken. It's confounding. She turned, but cannot shake the fear that if she did, he'd disappear. She freezes, then his voice comes sounding so close she feels it on her hair. "Don't give up now, you're almost there." Just 5 more steps, then Kinga faces a doorway open to the night. Beyond, a parapet that places her at the castle's greatest height. The views between the Merlons show her the city, sparkling far below her, stray light like grains of gold on black. But color draws her eyeline back and up, where swaths of blue and violet play host to stars of every size and brightness. "Oh my God," she cries, enthralled. She's never seen the sky lit up quite like this. She starts to spin, arms out to take the splendor in. Her soul awash with starlight soaring, she doesn't see the roughness where her high heel catches on the flooring, and Kinga's fingers close on air as she spills backwards toward the paving. He swoops in like a kestrel, saving her dizzy form from falling. Through his grace, he saves the lantern too. He murmurs, "Oh, how you enchant me." She's waiting for their lips to meet, but he returns her to her feet. "Why not?" the girl demands. "Why can't we?" He looks at her. "Because, my lamb, of who you are and who I am." "Oh yes," she says, "I've known who you are my whole life, just like you've known me. And from that, you believe we two are. We have no secrets here. We're free." He laughs, but there's no malice in it. Completely silent for a minute, when next he speaks, it's tinged with rue. "I think I am too old for you." "For everyone," she says, "I grant you, 400 years. He frowns, "Quite so." His eyes reflect the heavens' glow. She asks, a whisper, "I enchant you?" The stars in castle crash and blur as he leans in and kisses her. And I wanted to read that because this library was very much my inspiration for it. Or sometimes I would just come and, "Hi, Zoltan," and hang out and just, imagine somebody up there. Those balconies are terrifying, though. You're not allowed up there because the railings are too short, and I heard that, and I thought, no, that's silly, and then I was allowed to go up there. I'm like, okay, yeah, actually, I want to be on the ground now. So for my next book, my just-released book, The Glass Garden, this one does not rhyme. I'm sorry if that disappoints anybody, but rhyming is a lot. Okay, so this is a story about a woman, a PhD in anthropology, who gets summoned by her sister to join a salvage mission in space. Her sisters, they go to sites, they clean up what they can, sell what they can, but she has been invited to come on this. It is not a comfortable relationship between these two. And her baby sister is very excitable, but not very forthcoming. So she joins the crew on this planet. It's her sister and 3 other people who we're going to meet. And none of them really knows why they're here, only that it's something big and it's gonna make all their careers. And of course, as my son would say, nothing could possibly go wrong. All right, so they're about to go get off the ship, see what happens, and this will also give you a brief introduction to the other members of the crew. The 5 of them lined up at the door of the airlock, wearing layers of clothing against what Lissy said was a brisk outside environment. To Therese, the group was the epitome of ragtag, which made sense for Salvers. It was even romantic. She observed the small physical intimacies between C and McCardle and smiled beneath her mask. They were clearly a couple. Lissy was the leader and Carver. They looked closely at each other, finished one another's sentences, communicated without saying a word. Despite his demurring, she was sure the 2 of them had at least hook up. which left Therese the odd one out, wishing she and Dave had stayed together at least long enough to do this trip so she wouldn't fall into the stereotyped gap of the older, sexless, eccentric professor. But Dave would probably have published her research under his name afterwards, so really it was for the best. The airlock opened and the outside air hissed in, striking everyone's unprotected eyes with an acrid fug. Therese blinked against the tears that dripped onto her cheeks. The rest of the team was cursing, but clearly used to this sort of thing. Once her vision was clear enough, she stepped down the ramp with the rest of them and took in the 360-degree view of the planet's surface. It was desolate, desert-like, with not much to see beside rocks. Therese held up a hand to her face to shield her eyes from the weak blue light of the alien sun. With the ship at their back, a ridge of rock lay directly before them, toward which Lissy began leading the trek. Therese hoped their business was someplace before the ridge, since no one brought any equipment to climb it. "Little faster, please," came Lissy's muffled voice through her mask. She was ahead of them by a few strides, Carver right behind. C and McCardle stood shoulder to shoulder behind him. Therese sheepishly brought up the rear. Catching up to the crew, she fell behind again, soon her training taking over. "What's the matter, slowpoke?" Lissy called. "Survey," she answered, squatting low to examine the dirt and rocks around her. "Looking for evidence of intelligent construction." "Later, T, come on." Lissy resumed the path toward the ridge. Therese hustled to keep up. Why even bring me, she thought, if we're not going to do this right? Still, she kept her eyes on the ground, watching their boots form tracks in the powdery dirt. She swung her gaze from side to side, looking for anything that was too regular, too angular to be produced naturally. Perhaps this is why she missed that the crew had stopped and banged her head into Carver's back. "Sorry," she said. Carver only smiled. "Okay, let's pause a sec," said Lissy. "The ridge, about 100 feet in front of us, it's a cave system. So we're going to go in together and," here she pushed the words extra hard in Therese's direction, "do not separate until we have a better map of the insides. Get your lights ready, but prepare to douse them on my say-so." "Wait, Lissy," said Therese. "Where's the colony? I'm not finding markers anywhere." "You wouldn't and you won't. Colony's remnants are in that direction." She flung her arm toward the ridge, indicating the land beyond it. "And we will hit that later, but the real meat is in here." "Meat? Are there animals?" McCardle fiddled in their belts, where Therese expected to see a pistol. Only tools were visible. The other crew shifted. Was anyone armed? Should they be? "Not even bones," said Lissy. At this, a dry wind picked up, whispering against the rocks and dunes, whistling through the gaps created by the tubes of Therese's breathing apparatus. She scanned her field of vision for movement. Some sort of flying creature, bat-like, circled on the horizon. She listened for the friction of life against the ground, but the air canister pump was too loud. If there was anything alive on the surface, it seemed to be giving them a wide berth. But we're the aliens, aren't we, she thought, intruding where we shouldn't? Again, the party had moved on without her. Therese jogged after them. The chemical smell of canned air was making her nostrils burn, and she tilted her mask to the side to sample the planet's air for just a second. Musty and pungent, it sent her back into the mask. Even if they could breathe this atmosphere, they would need some sort of filter to keep from tearing up. The mouth of the cave stood about 4 meters high, gaping and blacker than it should have been. A maw, not a plain rock formation. Therese trembled, the others shivered. She blamed the chilly air and hoped they did too. The comradely banter had stopped, carried away by the wind, and now there was just this darkness in front of them. Even Lissy was quiet and focused on the cave entrance and not the faces of her companions, whose jaws dropped as far as the masks would allow and closed for nervous swallows and licking of lips. "Lights on," said Lissy. A few clicks from Therese and McCardle and Carver. C hadn't moved. "We're going in there?" he asked. "Well, duh," Lissy replied. "Is it safe? Is it stable?" "It's a cave that stood here for decades, if not centuries. Sure, it's stable. There's a nice wide path, and Carver and I didn't encounter any problems when we scouted. Come on, we've been in worse." "Worse man-made structures, yeah, but at least, hey." Carver looked C in the eye. His voice was soothing even to Therese's ears. "It's okay. It's more than okay. Trust me." Whether the words or the tone, it seemed to work. C clicked his light on, and the 5 beams together struck the waiting mouth, dissolving into the dark. Therese continued into the cave in survey mode, noting the angle of the light from outside, measuring the puddle of it on the floor before her. The rock walls glistened, probably volcanic glass. The air was dry against her eyes, but not as dry as the air outside. The ground was smooth, nearly slick, and she placed her feet carefully. Lissy's voice rang out, "Stay close behind me. There's a fork leading off to the right ahead. Don't take it. We'll come back and map it out later. For now, go straight." The crew obeyed, beams from their flashlights dancing in front of them. The narrow passage grew narrower, the ground bumpier. The swinging lights made Therese seasick. She reached for the wall to steady herself and nearly fell when her hand slid across the improbably smooth surface. More minutes passed, the sound of their footfalls absorbed by walls that should have echoed them. In time, the roof of the cave lowered until everyone was forced to stoop down while walking. Therese shuddered and forced herself to take deep breaths to ward off her very specific claustrophobia. As long as she could stand up, she'd be fine. But this, once she visited the inside of a pyramid with colleagues on their day off, as they stood in the central chamber, one started hyperventilating at the mere thought of the tons and tons of stone stacked above them. Therese didn't mind at all, but the tunnel leading into the chamber, with its short roof and one naked light bulb, that had been a challenge. This was worse. Therese shut her eyes and focused on the feel of the tunnel until they were through and she could stand at almost full height again. If it was over soon, it would be better. Lissy raised a hand. Okay, gang, we're here. However, you want to stay out with the lights or come in? I'm not going to miss this. The exchange resembled two 5-year-olds ruining their mother's surprise party. Lights off, everyone, Lissy commanded. Assorted grumbling dribbled around the face masks, but no lights went out. We'll be in the dark, C said. Therese sighed into her mask. Lissy, what are you doing? Lissy swung her light over the cave ceiling until it shone in Therese's face. T, I promise, the drama you're putting out is nothing next to what awaits you around the corner. Just turn off your lights already and watch your step. How are we supposed to do both? McArdle complained, but turned their light off all the same. The others followed, including Therese, who now had bright motes floating in her field of vision and had to rub her eyes to clear them. What choice did she have? She'd come so far for this, whatever it was. When she opened her eyes, she saw the subtlest shift in the floor, a pale blue glow. It seemed to come from the stones itself. See? Said Lissy, trust me, keep walking. How many steps of trust had the crew taken with her, Therese wondered. More than she, and they all led to this dark alien place. Huddled together, feeling reassurance now from the physical presence of another person in front of her, Therese followed the crew. One step, then another. At least the ceiling was higher here. She could stand up and breathe, even if it was just the canned air. It calmed her. Another step, Lissy's encouragement sinking into the slick walls. The glow grew stronger. It was muddy light, too many colors in one place, but not enough to make it pure white. The glow scattered and broke against the shadows made by the party as they edged forward. Almost there. The crew turned a corner ahead of her. Therese listened to their footsteps, shuffling together and then stopping entirely. She made the turn herself and was grateful for her mask. The air had gone out of her, and she wasn't sure the atmosphere of this planet was enough to bring it back. She whispered the most eloquent word she could think of. Crap. The tunnel had opened into a vast cavern. Distance estimation had never been her strong suit, but based on the heights of those assembled, Therese guessed the ceiling was 20 meters high at the topmost point, sloping to half that where it met the walls. Tunnels led away on the opposite side, giving the impression that this was the focus of the whole cave system, a sort of central terminal. The walls were the same igneous black, bathed in the gentle light that had guided them here. It seeped into the crevices so there were few shadows. Dramatic, but not blinding. Therese fiddled with the clasps on her mask. Eventually, her fingers caught just so, and she flipped the catches open. A thin stream of air crept in, cool against the trapped heat of her breath, shocking as she pulled the mask off completely. She shook her head, feeling the weight of her hair in its messy bun and her scalp damp with sweat. It was warmer here than outside, the air moist and fresh. She was ready to be snapped at for the breach of safety protocol, but C and McArdle were likewise removing their masks, and while Lissy kept hers on, the smile shone through the plastic and metal clear as anything. What did I tell you, she said. The wall, the window, the glow. In her head, Therese came up with many names. It was unprofessional, and none of them were adequate anyway, but she was driven by a desperate need to translate what she was seeing into language, something familiar, tangible, and understandable. This was none of those things. One wall of the cavern was lit, as if from behind, and upon it were images. Like a stained glass window in an abandoned cathedral, sunlight pouring in at just the right angle, throwing color and shape onto the dark expanse of the floor. But here, only the glow itself projected down, none of the details. But what details? Therese had seen plenty of stained glass in her day, but this was an order of magnitude finer. The leading, couldn't be leading, not this thin, was like strokes of ink on paper. As she moved closer, she saw that the window, no, it wasn't a window, needed a better word, began about 1 meter off the ground and ended maybe 3 meters above her head. The images impressed on it reminded her of Tiffany lamps at the art museum, but more free, more alive. It was a controlled explosion of what could only be called flowers on vines. She followed one, a stripe of powdery gray, to see where it led. It twisted among the flowers while a black branch of the same shape echoed it. A shadow, an evil twin. The flower on this vine had a bulbous calyx, spotted in red and white, with veins that reminded her of an infected eye. Was she being watched? Spiky black flowers sprung from a purplish stem. Living or dead? Other flowers were unexpected shades of green, or grew tentacles where you expected petals, ringed in circles like boils. The windows in cathedrals showed martyrs clutching lilies or roses or whatever their iconography dictated. These were not those flowers. These were flowers that watched martyrs put to death and grew exuberantly, mockingly from their remains. My God. The prayer echoed, and Therese saw everyone's eyes were on her. She blushed, but McArdle nodded, and she knew her reaction was hardly hers alone. Therese stepped a bit closer to take in more detail. There were creatures among the flowers, too angular to look like any arthropod she'd ever seen on any world. They flew, they crawled, they came in as many sizes and shapes as the flowers. The wings were made of glass, but not just in the wall, she felt certain, but whatever real-life form inspired it. They resembled an insect's idea of a space shuttle, or vice versa. Therese couldn't tell which was predator and which was prey. Having scrutinized the tiny lines of the wings, the wispy tendrils that emerged from the stamen of a lilac, Therese took 3 steps backwards to better see the image as a whole. The patterns were gorgeous, swirled and chaotic, life caught in glass. No beginning and no end. It was transcendent. C and McArdle remained glued to their positions on the floor, except now their shoulders were touching as they leaned together for support. Neither had spoken since entering the cave, but their eyes were wide. Lissy and Carver had now removed their masks and were beaming at the rest, their flesh picking up the bluish glow. Therese's heart thumped in her chest, but Lissy looked, well, like Lissy, comfortable and calm in the middle of wonder or danger. So what do you think? Lissy asked Therese, shaking her from the thoughts that had begun to swirl in her head. It was pleasant to be distracted by beauty, and especially in a place like this. Therese cleared her throat. So, is it a light well, she asked, illuminating from behind. Nope, Lissy answered. Carver and I thought that too when we saw it the first time, but we went over the range in the jump ship and there's no opening we could find. Later we'll get a drone or two to look closer, but it seems to be glowing by itself. Bioluminescence, asked C. I mean, a fungus could have created this pattern, or remnants from the flowers? Does anything about this look alive to you? Asked McArdle. It's a 2-dimensional picture of flowers and bugs. Somebody made it. Life permanently fixed in homage to itself, an offering to beauty. Therese didn't notice the silence that greeted her words. She breathed it in deep and detected a scent she couldn't quite pin down, like fresh grass or spice. She was closer to the image again, no memory of walking. Carver stood next to her, the glow turning his handsome face into something angelic. It's amazing, wasn't I right? He said to Therese, the twinkle in his eye faded and he returned to the wall. It's almost like his fingertips swept across the images before him in slow motion, but Therese couldn't bring herself to stop him. Carver, don't touch it! Lissy burst between her sister and her crewmates, slapping his wrist away from the wall. She locked eyes with Therese and said, we shouldn't get our fingerprints on stuff, right, T? We don't know if the oils in our skin could damage the artifact. Therese had to shake her head for the logic to break through. Yeah, absolutely. She looked closer at the wall. I don't think you heard anything, though. It looks all right to me. We should be more careful going forward. We don't know how fragile this is or what it's made of. Okay, said Lissy in her boss voice. T, put your mask back on. I don't think you're used to the air yet. Carver, this isn't one of our regular trash holes. Don't touch anything until she gives us the all clear. Therese complied. Her head was filling with fuzz. At least the mask only covered her nose and mouth and not her eyes. She wasn't ready to give up this vision. Okay, boss, we get it. McArdle's voice seemed softer, but that was probably the mask they'd replaced on their head. This is incredible. Are you sure we can detach it, though? I'm not sure how we get it out of the cave. Therese spun to face them. We can't remove it. What are you talking about? I'm talking about removing things of value from dead sites is what we do. We're salvers, not curators, unless you think we're going to settle down and start charging admission. It's priceless, Therese sputtered. Exactly, said C. Easy, all of you, said Lissy. Her face was still bare. Don't give us the it belongs in a museum speech, T, and don't disrespect my people. Therese's stomach dropped and she turned quickly to avoid McArdle's eyes. But no, Lissy continued, loud enough for everyone to hear, we are not going to hack it off the wall and ship it to some weirdo to store in his basement. This is a find, I think we all agree, and whatever happens to it, I want to make sure we, all of us, get the credit and the money we deserve for finding it and doing the initial work. This is why I brought you here. We can handle equipment and the odd shiny thing, but you're the only person I know with experience to handle something of this magnitude. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to head back to the ship. We're going to make a plan. Therese is going to walk us through the steps to deal with this properly. Then tomorrow we get to work. That okay with everyone? There was a general grumble of assent. Lissy turned her light back on. It was harsh and yellow in the cave, and Therese feared for the flowers and their delicate constitution, whatever it would prove to be. She wanted to protect the art, but she also didn't want to get yelled at. Lissy returned to the tunnel they'd entered from, Carver following close behind but looking over his shoulder, C and McArdle next, then Therese too, filing out of the presence of the most wonderful thing any of them had ever seen. Therese's feet kept pace better with the rest of the party on the way back to the ship, but her mind wouldn't start racing and she had to let it. This is how she did her best work. That thing in the cave was art. It was stunning. It was maybe alive. Who could have constructed such a thing and where the hell did it go? Civilizations died all the time, she reminded herself. Climates changed, fires and famines happened, and you had no choice but to pack up and move what you could. Sometimes it wasn't enough. The same forces that doomed the Windows creators had probably made life hell for the colonists. And no matter how gorgeous the rock art in the cave, it wasn't anything you could eat, probably. In between these speculations, her thoughts aligned in straight rows, step by step, laying out everything they would have to do next. Survey, recording, chemical sampling and analysis. Easy enough to get the equipment off-world. Did they have it here? Who wanted to take time, though, with something so incredible? Movement caught the corner of her eye. She squinted against the sun, now angled directly into her line of vision. About 30 yards away, two creatures were playing or fighting. They had leathery wings, surprisingly beautiful. They resembled the flying predator she'd seen before. Seeing them closer sealed the identification. Every so often, one of them bounced up from the ground, snapped something in its sharp jaws, then returned for more. Therese walked toward them, slowly, so as not to startle them, but that was a failure. The two creatures locked eyes on her, harmonized a sharp cry, and flew away to an outcropping of rock. Therese pursued them a bit further, but stopped before her boot crushed what had been the object of their focus. It was small and furry, another native of this planet, now dead, taking its next spin on the circle of life. The winged things had pulled it open, displaying its insides like an expensive carpet, strings and tubes of varying color and texture shining wetly in the sun. Therese crouched closer. Without a probe or even a thin twig, she had to satisfy herself with mere visual inspection. She had glued together plenty of pots, reassembled cracked reliefs and sculptures, but something so alien alive was another story. She despaired of identifying the parts, and it would make no difference if she could. Dead is dead. Fascinated her nonetheless. A black hole where one of the eyes had been was rimmed in blood, but the other eye remained, purple, with black pupils slit in a complicated petal pattern. It looked like a jewel. She wondered what it would feel like to touch. She reached out her hand. "Sis, what the hell are you doing?" Lissy's shadow slid over the beast's eye, robbing it of any shine. Therese sighed with the effort of standing up. Even through the mask, she could read the disgust on Lissy's face. "Do you study roadkill at home, too?" "Sometimes," Therese answered honestly. "It's the only time I get to see wild animals up close, you know? Much less their insides." "Okay, ew. We need to get to the ship so we can start processing the find. Remember why you're here?" "Yeah, I'm coming." "Good. Let the rooks enjoy their breakfast." "They're not rooks. They look like rooks. Or bats, I guess, but it's daytime, so rooks." "But, okay." It was pointless to argue, and while expedition protocols strongly discouraged randomly assigning Earth names to alien flora and fauna, it fit. You know, in some places, rooks are bad luck. They sure were for whatever that fuzzy thing was. Lizzie didn't even look back. Again, as she spoke, Therese followed her to the crew, listening to their footsteps in the sand, waiting to hear the dry rustle of wings, wishing the furry creature safe passage to whatever came next. I know one of these.
Thank you. Okay. We'll let you catch your breath. Our first question for you, of course, is how does it feel to be a two-time author? Congratulations.
Thank you. Oh, it's good. It's nice to have something tangible at the end of it, because writing it's kind of lonely, and usually you're doing it for yourself. You should be doing it for yourself, and you just hope that somebody else likes it enough. And so I've gotten lucky that people have liked my long stuff at least twice, so it's inspiration to keep going.
And what challenges have you faced in completing those works? Like in becoming an author, what would you say is maybe even your biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge is, I mean, there's the application of butt to chair, which is just doing the work. You know, there are writers who will tell you they write because they have to, and yeah, I believe them. It's just, they say one of the best ways to get your house cleaned is to have a writing deadline. You'll do anything else. So it's like sometimes, you know, it's once you get started, it's fine, but you're just staring at, it's a cliche to say staring at the blank page is hard, but it really is, because you have an idea, like, okay, so what's the first word I should put down? And once you get a couple of those, it's better. The other challenge is, of course, rejection. That hurts. You think you'll reach a point where it doesn't hurt anymore, but it can, you know, not enough to make me stop, but there are some days where I had a couple last week where I had 2 days where I got 3 rejections in a day. I'm like, okay, so it's going to be one of those days, is it? So those are challenges to keep yourself going.
I think that's really helpful too. I was curious what your advice for an aspiring author would be, and I feel like learning to take that rejection than it comes to even someone as talented as yourself.
Yeah, everybody gets rejected, and they don't want you to talk about it. They want you to talk about all the cool stuff. But even, I remember I went to a talk with two sci-fi authors I greatly respected, and one of them said, every 10 submissions I send, maybe I get one acceptance. And I'm like, yeah, me too. That's totally the ratio I hope to have someday. It's still good to hear. So yeah, it can be tough just remembering that it's not personal and so much of it is luck and what manages to strike with one editor or another, so you just have to keep working at it.
I think it's been working well for you so far. I think if we can draw attention to your accomplishment here at Night Library at Sternendat was a recipient of the, and I don't know if I'm saying this right, the Lord Ruthven Fiction Award. And this is among other recipients of this are Anne Rice, Guillermo del Toro, Chuck Hogan, Joe Hill, Charlene Harris, Grady Hendrix, and T. Kingfisher, just to name a few. This is who she's among here on this recipient. How did that come about? And
I campaigned for it. Because one of the things when this was published was the publisher said, have a look out for any awards that might be relevant. And this is one that was specifically for vampire fiction, media, nonfiction. I'm like, that one, I want, try the others too, but I campaigned. So, and I won, so I guess it worked. But yeah.
It was well earned. Congratulations. Now, what we heard in your reading, and what I know from speaking of you before, is that libraries are important to you. What is the importance of a library?
Oh, lots of importance. The first is that there's all these books and you can take as many of them as you want home. And if they stink, you bring them back. And that's that. It's just a great way to have all of this knowledge available to you, not just knowledge, entertainment, everything, ideas there. And all you have to do is fill out a form, ask nicely, and you can take it home. It's also good to have a place where you can use the bathroom and you don't need the little number printed on the bottom of your receipt. That is important if you're walking around in a city or if you have kids. So that just the idea of a public space that everybody shares and everybody benefits from it's invaluable. Yeah.
The little services there with the restroom, yeah, we do try. But no, absolutely. And we see a lot of familiar descriptions in your storytelling to where we sit today. So our library, the Thomas Crane Library, and specifically also the Richardson Building, we see connection to that in your work. And we understand that you also did some work here yourself when you completed school, if you want to share a little bit about that.
After I got my PhD and I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to return to that world, I took a year off to find myself. I think I was behind the couch. But one of the things I did was I volunteered here, and I thought I'd be putting books on the shelf, but somehow I got into the archives, and I was assigned to label and create a database for how many hundred glass slides are there in that collection?
An endless amount.
Oh, there's so many. These glass slides from about 100 years ago with pictures of Wollaston and Environs. It's buildings surrounded by nothing. That's especially in Wallace. It's like there's the Wollaston Library and just acres of nothing. And it's so strange. So I went through all of them and transcribed their descriptions into a spreadsheet and then made labels, wrapped them in those neat little acid-free papers, and lined them up in boxes. I think you can see them online. I think they've been scanned and put online, so you can find them through the library website. But yeah, I did that. That was cool.
And it's some of the most excellent work we have in the archives to date, I must say. I thought that before I knew who did it. But yeah, if you are interested in seeing some of the work that Jessica worked on, it is in our Parker collection. It is on Digital Commonwealth, and we can help you find that. But as you mentioned your time for yourself there, a little break, you've mentioned before that you had a little divorce from Egyptology. How has that influenced your work?
Yeah, so I have a PhD in Egyptology because when I was a little girl, I was going to be an Egyptologist. And I did it, and it wasn't what Indiana Jones led me to believe. Yeah, fewer Nazis, and I'm grateful for that, but So I taught for a while, but basically we wanted different things, Egyptology and I. So you can see a little of that I have a character here who's an academic. Yes, I'm guilty of writing characters who have my job, but it's hard. It's almost, I almost think fiction writing is easier than academic publishing, certainly. I mean, I've had a couple articles published and a couple that you send it out and then 9 months to a year later, you get the most scathing rejections from people who are trying to score points with their advisors. The kind of thing that makes you call your dissertation advisor in tears. Yeah, so I didn't want to do that anymore. So I did some teaching in Egyptology, but also mythology and folklore at a couple of colleges, and that was great. Learned a lot doing that. So yeah, that experience of wanting to do something, and it's just, wow, academic writing is hard. I think it takes a certain kind of focus that I don't think I had in the end.
Well, I think, again, we can see that influence from your real life into your work, and even with some of the selection that you shared with us this evening. For example, abandoned colonies, blue light, an alien sun, nighttime starting at noon, energy fences, bat-like flying creatures. You do a lot of this visual world building in your writing. Where do these images come from to create this alien world? Or this abandoned colony that we visit in the glass garden?
Well, the short answer is, around. I wrote this book, and I was not entirely sure what I was going to do. So I just sort of used whatever came across my path and brought it in. And yes, I do occasionally examine roadkill. I do find it interesting. And there was this poor bunny rabbit once I saw, and some blackbirds were having breakfast, and I'm like, you're in my book now, buddy. Put you there. And I mean, I've been in Egypt, and mostly I was at the pyramids for the dig I was on, so that's a very urban area, but we took excursions out to the desert where it is sand and rocks and little creatures scurrying. I had a dung beetle keeping me company once on my, by keeping me company, I mean I trapped him. And I was like, you're gonna be my pet for the next 20 minutes while I finish drawing this relief that I've been assigned, and then I let him go. But that's where a lot of that imagery comes from.
A captive dung beetle is a great a transition into this idea in your work of exploration versus exploitation. And that's reflected in the kind of the mining and the salvage versus the scientific debate that the team has. If you wanted to share anything about where that comes from.
Well, a little that's from my experience on a dig where we were, the team from Brown University working with the University of Cairo was digging in a site called the Abu Bakr Cemetery. Someone had already been through it, like decades before, but they did it the old-fashioned way, which is to say they dug, they grabbed anything that looked awesome, and they were gone. So our job was to go and do it right. And so I remember one time they were digging a pit to try to figure out the strata, and they thought they found something no one had seen, that maybe this was new, and then they found a newspaper from 1940 something, and okay, never mind. So a little bit of that Egyptology, especially in its early days, was very much go in with dynamite if you have to, grab anything that's shiny, and get out of there with no respect for, the people who still live there or the culture or that sort of thing, and that now Egyptology tries to be a lot more careful and more structured, more scientific even in its approach. So that influenced that idea.
Thinking on that as well, we have this experienced scientific team in your story, but they seem to fall into an almost obvious trap in their hubris a little bit, given their extensive backgrounds. It's frustrating to see these powerful kind of individuals and knowledgeable individuals kind of fall a little bit in their exploration. Do you see this as kind of like dream sequences or like the stress of like psychological strain, or is it more scientific?
I think what happens to the characters in this book is that there is a lot of pressure on them, various personal pressures, saving face among the group, saving face with a sibling, but also just the fact that these salvers in this story are recovering from a disastrous expedition. They teamed up with the wrong people, got left holding the bag, and their business is circling the drain. They need this. And their need for this is causing their leader and even the individual members to make not great decisions. And that sort of thing makes them very vulnerable to spoilers.
Carefully dance around any spoilers here. I do have a fun one for you, or it's fun for me,
Okay.
I guess. I hope everyone else. If this were turned into a film, who is your ideal cast?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. Maybe because I just watched Jennifer's Body a little while ago, but I thought Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried could be the sisters. But I would flip them. I'd make Amanda Seyfried the brass salver and Megan Fox the nerdy one. I think she could do it. So I thought of that, and then Vico Ortiz is an actor who was in Our Flag Means Death on HBO. I don't know if you saw that. I'm like, how would this person, how would they look with red curls? Could they do McCardle? Because McCardle requires a certain swagger. That's the engineer and the skeptic of this crew. Carver his job is to be beautiful and make permits happen easily, grease wheels. So I think you had a suggestion for his casting.
I had Dustin Milligan from Schitt's Creek. He plays
Yeah.
Ted in Schitt's Creek. I thought he would be perfect.
Poor Ted. Considering what happened. Yeah, so those are the ideas that I had.
I've also added Sophie Thatcher as Lizzie, I think is the younger sister.
Yeah, I'm not
She's
sure.
in Yellow Jackets,
I never saw
if anyone's seen it. I've written the whole script already in my mind. I have the whole film ready.
Okay.
We're ready to hit the stage. Okay, so part of this is for Quincy 400, and we're celebrating you today as a member of the community. What do you love about Quincy and the Quincy community?
I love a lot about Quincy. I love the restaurants. There are a lot of good places to eat around here. I like the size of this city. It's kind of perfect. I grew up in a suburb in Connecticut where there were no sidewalks. And why would there be? You can't walk anywhere. So Quincy to me is the perfect size. I mean, it's okay. Downtown, they rearranged it, and driving it, I'm still not used to, but it's great because I can walk to stuff. There's this library, there's the Wollaston branch that's a little closer, and the architecture is lovely. I also like, and I'm not trying to be cheesy, I like the diversity of this city. I was at Pride this weekend, and I had a great time, among other things, schmoozing the local artistic community. There's so many creative people here. And I feel like this is a town that supports that, which obviously means a lot to me. And of course, you have a good library system.
Thank you. What can we as a community take from your work, from whether it be both of the works or specifically the Glass Garden?
I'm not sure.
Or is that up to us?
Yes, that's up to you. You, the readers, yes. Honesty is a good policy. Looking before you leap, not judging instantly. These are all things that would have done these characters some favors if they didn't just jump into things. But also, trusting people who know what they're doing. I feel like that's important for some reason. That seems to be an ideal that has gotten away from some people. I have a PhD, I'm bitter about that sort of thing.
I think that resonates. It's very topical. And what's next in your writing? You have dreams to collaborate on a graphic novel. What might that look like?
I don't know, I just think it would be cool. I can't draw. So, someday if I could find somebody who can draw and we could work together, because I've got a bunch of fantasy and sci-fi stories that might look really cool. I mean, Glass Garden might look neat. I always have this dream of somebody just drawing stuff, the fan art thing. That doesn't happen nearly enough. So if you know anybody, tell them.
There's any artists in the crowd. And of course, on your to meet list is Stephen Colbert. What will you say to him when you finally get to meet him?
I don't have to say anything. I have a little journal that I bought at the height of Lord of the Rings mania. It's got Arwen on it, and I wrote things in Elvish inside. I think I'll just show him that, and I'm pretty sure we'll be best friends forever. I think that's how it would work, so.
From what I've heard from this interview, yeah, I trust that will do it.
I think that's really all I'm gonna need.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing all of this. Did you want to leave any parting words, or do we have any questions from the audience? Yes.
Bob, what would you think of me as an illustrator?
We'll have to talk.
We'll circle back on that
We'll
one.
get back to that one, sure. See how your style develops.
So with your background in Egyptology and archaeology, how did you get interested in fantasy and science fiction as your genre to write?
I don't know if you can be interested in Egyptology without being at least a little
That was your
interested.
background, I'm saying.
Yeah.
So-
I just always loved it.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I grew up in the height of Star Wars. Okay, I know, Star Wars. Back when there was only like one movie and there was a couple of years between them, but yeah. So I've just always liked it. I like Star Wars. I love everything about Lord of the Rings except actually reading the book. Sorry, Tolkien, it's not exactly my style. But so all of this is interesting, and when you love it that much, you want to try to make up your own weirdnesses and fantasies and see what you can do with that.
How long did it take you to write each of those books, especially the poetry ones?
The poetry one took me, the first draft, just shy of 2 years. I got faster as it went on, and people ask, why did you do it in poetry? And I tell them honestly, because it's easier. There's something about having a structure that I respond to very well. That this is what it looks like, and it was pulling teeth at the beginning, but after a while I got better. So it used to be, if I wrote 3 stanzas a week, I was happy, and by the end, I could almost improvise them. I got very good at it. So that took about 2 years. This book, less. It was not as structured, because one thing about writing in poetry, you can't just go out of order and do whatever you want. This book, I was inspired by a stained glass at the Museum of Fine Arts. And then one day I'm like, okay, you know what? 500 words a day. Just write down what happens next. Keep going. And it's funny, I look at that draft and there are characters that didn't make it to the next draft, and they're like ghosts that haunt the place, which is kind of fitting, actually. So that one took me less time to write because there was less of a learning curve. But there were other learning curves. I have a friend who's an engineer, and I had to run stuff by him when they start repairing the ship. And he's like, I don't know about any of this, but the engineering feels real. I'm like, I'll take it.
Yes.
What do you write besides novellas? I look at your web page sometimes, and I also don't know how you work on other things while you're writing a novella.
I write novellas because, I don't know, I don't know how people write the doorstopper books. I've just never quite, maybe someday I'll work up to that, but novella so far seems to have been a good length for me. Excuse me. I also write short fiction. So, if you go to my website, you can see I have links to what's available online and stuff. I published a 100-word drabble once. That was a fun challenge. So that sort of thing. And I usually work on one thing at a time, or, I have them staggered. One thing's in draft. Like right now, I have a book that's in its second draft, and I'm letting it set up before I jump back into it, and I'm working on drafting something I'm hoping will be a sort of collection of interconnected fairy tales, or maybe not. Fingers crossed it's going to work out. I'm still on the 500 words a day. Just let's see what happens next.
Is this part of like a book tour? Are you going to go other places, do something similar?
Right. Okay, I do have one more stop coming up next month. I'm going to be doing a reading and maybe some panels, we haven't figured that out yet, at ReaderCon in Burlington, Mass. So that's going to be my next stop, and then we'll see.
We have another question in the back.
Yes, what is your view on AI just vibes?
AI stinks.
A solid take. And where do you want to share where everybody can find more about you if they haven't already visited your website?
The website is the best place. It's my calling card. It has links to everything that I've written, where you can find it, contact information. I also have a newsletter, and you can find the link to sign up to that if that's a thing that I promise it's not spammy. I do it like once a month, and I try to maintain a minimum of cat pictures, because I understand that that's what I enjoy in newsletters anyway. So yeah, that's the best way to find out more.
You're in good company with those cat photos. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you, Jessica, for being here. And please make sure you visit at the back, grab your copy of both books, and get them signed. Thank you all.
Thank you. No. Yeah, I'll get it.